tell Jack about the dowry.
Welcome to the Progress Texas Happy Hour.
If you don't have a wedding, we can just get married.
Welcome back to the Progress Texas Happy Hour. I'm podcasting director Chris Mosier. For progressive folks across the country, and especially here in Texas, it's been a rough first year of the second Trump term, and that year's not even halfway over yet. Constant ridiculousness from D.C. met with open arms and frequently replicated by the elected Republican majority at the Texas state capitol have been a source of shame and apprehension for those of us who know better. But a new phase appears to be dawning. Trump's popularity is plummeting, and more Americans and Texans are tiring of his constant drama at a far faster rate at this stage in the game in Trump 2.0 than we saw the first go-round in 2017. At Progress Texas, we've observed the shellacking of MAGA candidates at the hands of Democrats and progressives across Texas in the May municipal elections, and we feel the tide is turning. We hope you feel it too, and we hope you feel both the dawning opportunities and the chance to channel the frustration and anxiety of being forced back into Trump's world into a huge wave of positive change in the upcoming elections, especially the 2026 midterms, when we can and must place a check on the madness that Republicans are even now attempting to impose on us all. In Texas, a key figure in that madness for the last decade has been Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, whose position of complete control over the agenda of the Texas Senate rightly places him at the center of blame for just about all of the right-wing insanity that's come to plague the people of Texas. For a decade now, Dan Patrick has consistently advanced policies that favor the wealthy and the powerful at the expense of the working class and marginalized Texans. He has worked for years towards establishing a private school voucher scheme, finally with success this session, that will drain public money from the neighborhood schools at the heart of communities across Texas into private and religious schools, catering to the rich at the expense of the rest, not only callously disregarding the educational and economic opportunities of our young Texans, but also their health and well-being today, by steadfastly blocking efforts to expand Medicaid in Texas, turning down the return of tens of billions of our own federal tax dollars, and keeping millions of Texans bereft of access to affordable health care, all while protecting corporate insurance and pharmaceutical interests. Dan Patrick has supported massive property tax cuts that disproportionately benefit wealthy homeowners and businesses, while doing little to address the ever-growing financial strain on Texas renters and underfunded local services. He gets away with all of this by dividing Texans on culture war lines, attacking LGBTQ plus rights, transgender rights, reproductive freedom, voting access, and much more, turning Texans against one another as a distraction from the deep economic inequities in Texas that he himself has helped to build. Under Dan Patrick's leadership, the Senate for the last decade has served elite donors and ideological interests while undermining the lives of ordinary Texans. Dan Patrick's agenda reflects a clear pattern, protecting privilege while leaving everyday people to bear the costs. Now that I've got that off my chest, we welcome a very special guest for a very special announcement that for those of us who see her regularly around Austin, it probably won't be much of a surprise, but for the rest of the Lone Star State, it's a very, very big deal. Proud to welcome Austin State Representative Vikki Goodwin. Good morning, and thanks for joining.
Good morning, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So before we get to your announcement, and I think in my opening tirade, I may have mostly covered it, would you please share with us from your perspective as a person with longstanding experience at the Texas State Capitol, in a bit of a nutshell, tell us what Dan Patrick has done to Texas.
Well, he has taken us in the wrong direction. He is a big supporter of vouchers and taking money out of our public schools, sending it to private schools. He is also doing the same thing at the university level, which is just crazy. I believe that schools are foundational to our success and prosperity in the state. And he rules the Senate with an iron fist. Anything that he wants will happen, but if he does not want a bill to pass, it will not see the light of day. And so he's somewhat of an autocrat over there in the Senate. He's not paying attention to the things that really matter to most Texans, which is our public education, affordability for healthcare, for housing, looking at our water and energy resources and making sure that we're doing good planning and all the things that the vast majority of Texans care about. Instead, he's diverting attention on these dog whistle issues, the red meat issues like the 10 Commandments, prayer in our schools and things like that.
A lot of which we'll get to, but I would say it's sufficient to say that a change in leadership in the Senate is possibly needed, which brings us to your announcement that we've asked you to join us for today. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I am planning to run for lieutenant governor in 2026. Simply put, we need change.
Absolutely. Formal announcement then is what we're doing here. A formal announcement.
That's right. That's right. I'm very excited. I want to start early because Texas is a big state and I want to get around and see and meet people and talk to them and let them know who I am and why I would be the best lieutenant governor for Texas.
Very cool. So as I mentioned, for those of us around Austin who go and do, fun political things, you're a regular. You show up to these things. You're a person who's engaged and active in your community, and that's terrific to see. A lot of folks across Texas may not know you as well as we do here in Austin. So part of the purpose of our conversation is a bit of an introduction. Give folks who are new to the world of Vikki Goodwin a bit of an introduction and tell us why you've made this huge decision to run for this huge statewide office.
Yeah, well, I am a small business owner, a mom, a wife. I never thought that I would run for office, but back in 2018, I felt very passionate about what was happening in the world, what was happening with our public education system. And so I wanted to make sure that we had a strong supporter of public schools. The district that I ran in was currently held by a Republican who education was not his strong point. And so I ran then. I was told at the time that I wouldn't win, so I'm used to challenges. I enjoy having served on many different committees in the legislature. When I was on the Environmental Regulation Committee, during the interim, we actually went out to Odessa, Texas, and I had the opportunity to see things like Lake Beamer, some of the problems that the oil and gas industry have led to with the old oil wells that have come uncapped. But after that, I also went and saw one of the ranches where you had this beautiful spring that has dried up as a result of pulling too much water out of the aquifers. And I've had an opportunity to go down to Laredo. Last session, I passed a bill with Senator Zaffarini around drowning prevention. And so we went and had a press conference to talk about that. Water safety, we had the mayor and city council members come and talk about what great things are happening in Laredo. They're very proud to say that it's the largest port in Texas. And so I enjoy traveling the state, learning what's going on in different areas. And really some of the issues that I thought might be more important to people in my district in Central Texas are really important all around the state, including housing affordability. I went to a conference in Alpine, stayed one night in Fort Davis, and this woman that worked at a coffee shop there said that Fort Davis had become too expensive for her. The rent went up too much, so she had to move to Alpine and commute. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. Yeah. But housing affordability is a huge issue.
Absolutely. So it sounds like, and you just said, finding the joy in traveling across Texas and meeting all these, different people in the various communities that make up our great state. That's going to be your life running for lieutenant governor. It's a big challenge. It's a big undertaking. I would say the biggest campaign of your career. Tell us what you expect life to be like on the campaign trail over the next several months.
Well, I do expect a lot of traveling, and I'm excited about that. I really do enjoy going out. In fact, over the past few months, I've continued on weekends, and whenever I can get away, I've gone to Waco and Fredericksburg and all sorts of places to talk to people about what's happening currently in the legislature. And up until now, haven't been able to say that I am running for lieutenant governor. So I'm very excited that now I can say I am running and continue the work of traveling and talking to folks all over the state.
So let's cover some of the basics here to really understand what we're talking about. To people who are maybe not quite as wonky as some of us are with politics, the position of lieutenant governor appears on its surface to resemble maybe the position of vice president, for example, but it's quite different from that. It's frequently said that in Texas, the position, the office of lieutenant governor is actually a more powerful office than the governor's office is in some ways. Rep. Goodwin, what do we mean when we talk about that slight advantage in power that some say that the lieutenant governor's office has?
Yeah, well, I would say that he and the governor are equally powerful. He has the power to stop legislation from ever getting to the governor's desk. He really does set the agenda in the Senate. If it's not something he wants to pass, it won't. And if it is his priority, it's likely to make it at least out of the Senate. In the past, we've always had this a little bit of tension between the Senate and the House, where the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor might have differences of opinion. This session, there's less of that. Speaker Dustin Burrows has been on board with many of the Lieutenant Governor's priorities, particularly the voucher priority.
They appear to kind of have carte blanche at this point. I remember hearing Lieutenant Governor Patrick talking about how he's had a boring session. And I would say it's boring for them because they've kind of got all the power. And that's part of what we're, perhaps looking to make a change with here. We've also talked about, the priorities of the lieutenant governor, should he choose to make them this way, can be very personal. He can direct the Senate, the upper chamber, and the legislature of, the greatest state in the nation, literally at his own personal whim. And Dan Patrick is known to do that. In fact, at the beginning of the session, he outlined a whole bunch of his priorities, actually in two different parts at the beginning of the 89th session, some of which have come through to fruition, others of which are still sort of pending. But Rep. Goodwin, I wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on some of these priorities that Dan Patrick has laid out, so we can get a picture of how the two of you might approach this a little bit differently from one another. Starting here, and this is cherry picked, starting here with the requiring of local law enforcement to assist in the federal government's deportation efforts. What do we think on that one?
Well, I think that that's really taking them away from what they are supposed to be doing, building relationships in their community and working on public safety in their community. And it's not their job. That's why the federal government deals with border issues and immigration. Local law enforcement should be there to handle. They have enough on their plate already.
Absolutely. This next one's kind of comical, but it actually is serious for some Texans. This fixation that Dan Patrick has developed about banning all THC products in Texas, which technically, for the most part, are illegal anyway. What gives there?
Right. Well, he does want to ban it. I think most people agree we need to regulate and make sure that cannabis products are sold only to people 21 and up, just like alcohol. Treat it the same way, put regulation around it. But otherwise, you're going to end up with a black market. We also need to do more research and find out, does it help in what situations? I know a lot of veterans came to the Capitol to testify as to how it's been very helpful for them with their PTSD, with stress, anxiety, and also with pain management.
DFW and North Texas friends, Progress Texas is excited to invite you to join us to celebrate our 15th anniversary in Dallas. Come meet and mingle with political movers and shakers, lawmakers, advocates and activists, and just plain cool Texans who, just like you, are digging in for progress in the Lone Star State and loving every minute of it. Tickets and sponsorship opportunities are available now at progresstexas.org. Thanks to generous folks like Howard Cleon, Charles Zeller, Pamela Pearson, Chuck Cruz, Amy Forehand, John Mazzaro, and many others for their kind support. Join them and us to celebrate 15 years of progress on Monday, June 9th in Dallas. Details and tickets now at progresstexas.org.
Combining two into one here, just out of convenience and expediency's sake, Dan Patrick wants to place the 10 Commandments in all Texas public school classrooms. He also wants to do what he calls protecting the freedom to pray in school. Part of this really broader push that we've seen as of late for conservative folks to shove their religious views into our classrooms. Talk about that in general, would you?
Yeah, well, simply put, I believe in the separation of church and state, but obviously our state leaders don't anymore. And so it's unfortunate because we have students of all different religious beliefs, and it might be very confusing to them, or they might believe that if the teacher says this, it must be true, and it might not be a part of their faith belief. So it's really unfortunate. The place for that is in our church and church schools, not in our public schools.
Right. And back at home, I would add to that. Here's one that's also curious, especially considering, as we've talked about, the plummeting popularity of not only Donald Trump, but also his favorite lieutenant in Texas transplant, Elon Musk. and the things that Elon Musk has made no friends doing in D.C. with his Doge efforts. Dan Patrick wants to establish a Texas Doge, which is supposedly, again, put in his words, to improve government efficiency. We've seen the chainsaw tactics that have been done in D.C. by Elon Musk. We have no reason to believe that it'd be done any different here. What do you think of the establishment of a Texas Doge?
Right. I think we all agree that we don't want fraud, waste, or abuse, but I think that they're taking this too far in terms of, say, for example, Medicaid. One of the senators said we have too many people on Medicaid, which is simply not the truth.
Right.
The recipients of Medicaid health insurance are typically children. 76% of recipients are children. Then you have women who are giving birth, and they can stay on Medicaid for a year after giving birth. And then we have very low income people who have cancer and things like that. So really, we don't have too many people on Medicaid, and it's not been shown that there is fraud, waste, and abuse within the Medicaid system. So it's just unfortunate that we're trying to cut back on things with a dialogue that's incorrect.
Kind of on that same line, Rep. Goodwin, talking about essential health care, Dan Patrick talks about fixing women's health, referring to the Life of the Mother Act that's been of such debate over the course of the session. Clearly a problem that Dan Patrick and his fellow Republicans have created in the first place. What would you say to Dan Patrick's admonitions that we should fix women's health?
Well, really what we ought to be doing is letting doctors do their jobs. We have made it so that they're afraid to help women who are in pregnancy emergencies. If their water breaks early, a doctor is saying, well, I can't really do anything unless she's on the verge of death. And so the Life of the Mother Act, I have voted for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's essential that we fix what we've done with the total abortion ban in Texas. But let me just say, I am for allowing women to make decisions about their own bodies. And I think that this Life of the Mother Act doesn't go nearly far enough. But obviously, Dan Patrick is in favor of it because he realizes that women are dying unnecessarily, and they have to fix the mistake that they made.
Moving on to another situation, not so much a problem, well, I guess a problem that they created, but a problem that almost doesn't exist. I think most people would agree. The idea that we need to stop non-citizens from voting.
Right. We don't allow non-citizens to vote in Texas, but they will bring that up as a talking point. We voted on a bill the other day to ensure that we're not. They can't register to vote in Texas. They don't vote in Texas. And so, again, this is just a distraction from the real issues that we have today.
And to end the lightning round here, this is one that is also somewhat comical if it wasn't, so cruel, is the idea that something must be done about drag time story hour.
Right. We keep getting distracted by these really non-issues. I think it's unfortunate that we're making it very hard for our libraries and our librarians. And now we're adding this issue of drag time, story time, or whatever they want to call it. It's sometimes people want to dress up and read books to kids. I think that this has happened in some red areas of the state as well.
Sure.
I think I heard about it at Texas A&M.
Sure.
So it's unfortunate that we're trying to censor our books and thoughts and everything.
Right. In a way that tries to engineer ignorance for division is really what that's about. And one last thing I'll throw at you here that I added to the list late, Rep. Goodwin. If you'll recall, just probably a month and a half ago, the measles outbreak in West Texas was starting to get really scary, and people were starting to get, almost flashbacks of COVID. That now we have suddenly this disease that's coming after us. That happened to be right the same time that Dan Patrick decided that it was really, really important to change the name of the New York strip steak to the Texas strip steak. And this is kind of more of what we're talking about. It's nonsensical sort of distraction. But is there anything, clearly these tactics work for Dan Patrick and Republicans, or they wouldn't keep doing this?
Well, distractions and division. I think a lot of people in Texas have found that politics can be very divisive, and so they don't even want to pay attention anymore because they don't want to be pulled into that divisiveness. And who can blame them? I think it's really unfortunate that we don't have people from both parties saying, look, we have a measles outbreak in Texas. I mean, people died.
Yes.
And it's very simple. Get the vaccine and then you'll survive. Get the vaccine and you likely won't get measles. Get the vaccine and we'll have herd immunity. But unfortunately, instead, we had a bill that came to the floor making it easier for parents to opt out of vaccination, which is really unfortunate.
That's right. That's right. So this is going to be a statewide race, Rep. Goodwin, and in order to win, you're going to have to convince a bunch of Texans who normally vote Republican to vote for a Democrat this time. And some of those folks might be listening to our conversation right now. So addressing them directly, why is Vikki Goodwin a better choice for Texans who lean conservative and tend to vote that way, but are also worried about the direction that our state is headed under Dan Patrick and Donald Trump?
Well, first and foremost, because I listen to the people of Texas, and I know that the vast majority of Texans agree on some things that I agree on. Number one is making sure our neighborhood schools are well supported. Number two would be making sure that things are affordable, our housing, our healthcare, and accessible. I had some ideas around the Fair Rent Incentive Act was one of my bills this session to put downward pressure on rent so that people would be able to save to be able to buy a home. I also had a bill that would have expanded Homes for Heroes, which is a program that the state has now for low interest rate loans for buying a home and down payment assistance. But we could expand that program and allow more people to use that to help them get into a home. So housing affordability, water planning, I really want to talk about the issues that are so critical to everyday Texans. We talk a lot about the working families of Texas, and I feel like they're not getting where they ought to be in terms of stability and not having financial stress in their life. And so I think that I do appeal to a large number of people. I'm not going to talk about the issues that divide us. And, I want to hear from Texans and hear what it is that they want.
Very, very good. And kind of on the flip side of that same question, Rep. Goodwin, for progressive Texans and regular Democratic voters, many of whom are still kind of in the dumps, frankly, over the party's performance last year and maybe are unsure about how the Democratic Party is performing, which direction it's headed. Why should these people renew their excitement for Democratic prospects in 2026? And what can those folks do to help you in your campaign?
Well, they can see where the Republican leadership of the state of Texas has taken us over the last 30 years. And they can look at my record and what issues I've been working on. Again, I've always worked on public education, trying to make sure that we're giving the support to our teachers and students that's needed. Something that we haven't talked about yet, but gun violence prevention. I know when I was out on the campaign trail, my first session, talked to a woman who was a teacher and said one of her students wouldn't sit with his back to the door because he wanted to be able to see if a shooter walked into the classroom. We have done nothing to address the issue of gun violence. And I think there are some sensible things. In fact, there were 2 Republican bills that passed the House last session that the lieutenant governor wouldn't do anything with in the Senate. And they were both Republican authored bills that would have made our community safer in terms of gun violence prevention.
Well, we want to thank you so much for standing up for such a huge but a super important challenge here. And we'll definitely be watching, of course. Is there anything else you want to throw in before we wrap up, Rep. Goodwin?
No, I'm just really excited. I look forward to meeting people on the trail as I run for lieutenant governor, and I hope that you'll reach out to me. I'm very easy to find online, although you do need to know how to spell my name. It's Vikki and not Vicki.
Very, very
and
important.
Good win. We need a good win for Texas.
Absolutely. Built-in campaign slogan. Look at that. That's wonderful.
There you go.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, and best of luck, and thanks for the time spent this morning. Here at Progress Texas, our mission is to counter the conservative disinformation machine, but they far outmatch us in funding. Oil and tech billionaires and religious right-wing activist groups spend a lot of money keeping their audiences in the dark. If you've come to appreciate the light that we shine on important political news in Texas on a daily, ongoing basis, please know that our regular everyday listeners form a key component of our funding. If that's you, we could use your support as a monthly contributor. No amount is too small. Go to progresstexas.org. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your day.